Okay. So we'll take a moment just to settle down, breakfast and distractions in between. So to just take a minute, breathe, just focus on the breathing, let go of any disruptive thoughts. And then to spend a moment to generate the right kind of motivation. To remember why you're here. And to make use of the opportunity to learn more about your mind. In order to become a more peaceful, happier and calmer person. In that way to be of greater benefit to yourself and others. So that this becomes the cause at some point to fully actualize the great potential of your mind. So with this motivation in the back of your mind, let's recite the prayers. The Tibetan, okay? You ready for the Tibetan? Do you have Tibetan in here?
Yes.
Okay.
Page 10.
Page 10. So we do it in Hebrew twice. That's okay. We do it in Hebrew twice and another in Tibetan.
Buddha Padama Ilai Vakeshikla Adlava Bensalutu Nizvoli Shalakshvala Dharma Urasik Budayut Kudiloila Tsuimundidim Buddha Padama Ilai Vakeshikla Adlava Bensalutu Nizvoli Shalakshvala Dharma Urasik Budayut Kudiloila Tsuimundidim Sangye Choda Tsoki Chonanda Janchu Badu Dani Kyatsu Chi Dagi Jinso Kipe Tonam Ki Dola Penche Sange Dropa Sho. 4 immeasurables. Page 11. Luis Kukol Valerdam, Ocean, Ocean. Luis Kukol Valerdam, Seven, Seven. Nulolam Luis Kukol Valerdam, Ocean, Luis Kukol Valerdam, Yadishtabu, Belong Sopani, Shishma.
Okay. So we continue. It's a lot of material, I realize that, and so I may not be able to read through everything, as in like leave out some bits that you can do on your own. It's not that hard to understand. So we go through the most important bits. Okay. So as you've heard yesterday, well, just to check with you, what is the definition of consciousness? Well, sure.
Luminous and knowing.
Yeah, that which is luminous and knowing, exactly. What does luminous mean? Clear. What does clear mean?
It reflects.
Pardon?
It reflects.
Well, first of all, clear means to be non-physical. That's one way of looking at it. And another meaning is? Things can appear to it. Yes, it reflects things. Things can appear to it, or it can be reflected within the mind. Great, very good. Okay. What does knowing mean? It can cognize things. It has the potential, even though it may not always do so, but it has the potential at least to cognize things, to know things. Great. Okay. Did you watch your own mind? You did. Good. Was that easy? At times, yeah, when we thought of doing it, right? Okay, great. Now, I spoke a lot about objects of the mind. Why? Because what is relevant for us to understand the mind is, there are two things basically, very important to understand about the mind when you watch your own mind. What is the object? And what does the mind do with the object? But it all basically, it always holds onto an object, it always apprehends an object. Every mind does that. But it can do more than that. It can do more than that. What other things can the mind do? In general. What can the mind do in general? It apprehends, it cognizes or perceives something. Okay, what else can it do? Yeah. Label, very good.
Remember.
Remember. Yes? Feel. Good. Think. Mm-hmm.
Intent.
Pardon?
Intent.
Have a certain intention. Yes, yes, great. Intend something, to do something, yes. What else?
Plan.
Plan. Great. A lot. What else? Pardon?
Calculate.
Calculate, yes.
Speculate.
Huh? Speculate. Mm-hmm. What else?
Tell stories.
Tell a story. Now we're going more into the direction of like, you were all like calculate, remember, all like correct types of mind. Tell a story.
Invent. Expect.
Invent, expect. Right, great.
Create.
Imagine, create. Yes, great. Yeah. Make a mistake. Oh, nice one. Yeah, make a mistake, right? So, therefore, the object is important. What does our mind take to mind? What does it actually do? Plus, how does it do so? So recognizing that. Now from a Buddhist point of view, there's a big claim. There's a huge claim saying all our troubles come from our mind doing it in a way which harms us. Doing certain things, taking on certain objects, and doing with them certain things that actually harm us. And that's where all our trouble lies. That's actually great to hear that. Because I don't have to change everyone around me. No? All I need to do is adjust my mind. Right? Okay. Now it sounds easier than it is. It's really, really difficult, but not impossible. And it gives us so much freedom. All right. But going back to, well, what we discussed yesterday, so in terms of the object, there is something that appears to the mind, there's an appearing object, and there is an object that is described as object of engagement. Trust me, it's not my favorite phrase, my favorite term. Object of engagement. Huh? It's really bizarre. That's the word that has been used, and it translates a Tibetan word, and it's actually a literal translation. So it's just a matter of getting used to it. Right? You say it twice, you say it 3 times, you hear it 5 times, you're done. Okay, got used to it. So object of engagement basically describes the object that is perceived, that is cognized. And the appearing object, as the term suggests, it describes the object that appears to the mind. And as we discussed yesterday, you can have something appear without the mind cognizing it or being aware of it. You can cognize something that doesn't need to appear. Doesn't need to appear. It's not something that appears, for instance, to your eye consciousness. What appears to your eye consciousness but you're not aware of?
The subtle
The subtle,
existed, like material.
the subtle material, like the subtle particles. Great. They appear. If they didn't all appear, nothing could appear. So they appear. They're reflected. I like that, the way someone said it, as they're reflected in the mind. Yeah, very nice way of putting it. They appear or they're reflected in the mind. In Tibetan, they also say it arises in the mind. Like a reflection, an appearance of it arises in the mind. Great. So, that is not, we're not aware of that. Is there anything else you could come up with? Like something that appears, yes?
It's easy, you need to select. You have too much visual effect.
Yeah. It's like, wow. It's like, but our mind only takes in certain things. Certain things just appear, right? When I look at all of you, actually my eye consciousness, like this is kind of my sphere of vision. It goes that far, right? It's kind of like that spectrum. So within that, like, I focus on you right now, but everything else is still appearing. And so yes, absolutely. There are things that appear, but I'm not aware of. Great variety. The clothing you wear right now, it's all appearing. But ask me at lunch what you were wearing, no idea. Okay, great. Yes?
Everything appears, but we don't see it. It is like when I drive here, I don't see the trees.
Yes,
I
yes.
don't see anything, only if I focus.
Yeah, it's better you don't while you're driving.
Well,
Right?
sometimes.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the point being that, yeah, a lot of things that appear. And I mean, honestly, if we think of modern science, there are all these radio waves and, I don't know, gamma rays and I don't know what else, right? All these different rays and what else? Radioactive, no, not radioactive, X-rays, you know, whatever, different, and we don't perceive those. When we smell, I mean, come on, I mean, like a dog has 1,000,000 times stronger sense of smell. So how much smell do we miss out on? Maybe not always that bad that we miss out on some smells. But yeah, so of what can actually appear to our mind, to our eye consciousness, it's a lot of things can't even appear. Can't even appear. So what appears to us? Well, that's exactly there. It's to be seen. Also, we have a sense we're in the present. No, we're actually a little bit behind. Because whatever appears to us, it takes a while, you know, through the eye, and we'll talk more about this, like what happens. So the eye, it's like, scientifically you have the retina, and it's reflected there, and then the brain, and, you know, the neurons fire in a way. It takes a few split seconds for what is out there to be reflected, that is to appear to our mind. And of course, like I said, with modern physics, we actually know that colors, as they appear to us, are not found to exist in the same way out there, because they're just light waves of different length. And the longer the light wave, the different the spectrum of color, right? I don't even know. Short, long, which one is it? Red, long? I don't know. Never mind. You may know. But the point is that actually, a lot of what is there, doesn't appear, we don't see. We're not really in the present, although we may think so, but whatever appears to us was there a split second before. Plus, the colors that appear to us don't really exist that way. So really, when we think about this, how much of what we perceive is really out there? Kind of bizarre, isn't it? And so here we're already facing one hand reality versus the sense we have of reality. The sense of how we perceive it, how we instinctively feel, oh, it's like it's exactly what it is, what it's like. But if you think about it, just taking modern science, we miss out on so much, and we perceive things incorrectly, even without sense consciousnesses. Right? Okay. Now, having talked about the objects, okay, so this is difficult, this is complicated. You will not walk away from here going, oh yeah, I understand the objects of the mind, it's kind of clear. Years and years we learned about this. So don't expect to get a full understanding, but you have already some basis. And based on that, you can continue reading, learning about this. But what is relevant here, like I said, to check what appears to my mind, to wonder or to analyze every now and then, well, it seems to be as if I perceive the things as they are, but is that really true? Taking the scientific approach, taking the Buddhist approach, using common sense. All right. Now, okay, so what did I do yesterday? I talked about appearing object, etc. So here you can read this on your own. I gave an example of like very simple example. Usually in the scriptures they talk about vases. Vase. As if the Tibetan had like lots of, well, they kind of had these vases, like ritual vases that they used for certain ceremonies, and they were usually in like a prayer hall that were usually present, and so it was always something you could point at. The modern example, is there a vase here? No vase. So the modern example would maybe be a table. Okay? I just use vase because we come across vases all the time, might as well get used to it. Vases and pillars. Okay. That's kind of like the Israeli version of a pillar in like the monasteries. In the monasteries, to keep up the roof, they have these huge pillars. All right, many of them. So pillars and vases, those are usually the examples. But tables works nowadays. So a table is your main object. That's your object of engagement. You focus in, there's all these objects around, but I want to know about the table. Is there a table or not? So my mind focuses on the table and the subtle particles appear. I also know opposite of not table. I know opposite from not table, which is kind of abstract, but my mind knows it automatically. It knows it automatically, but it doesn't appear. It's not like opposite from non-table. It doesn't have a shape or color. In fact, it's something permanent. Opposite from not table. It's something permanent. It's just the opposite of not being table. And permanent and impermanent, a little bit hard to understand, but it's basically just saying things change. The fact that things change refers to their impermanence, and something that doesn't change from moment by moment. It's like an abstract, well, that is permanent. That's all it means. All right. Anyway, don't need to go into that. But then on page 6, all right, so this you can read on your own. If you have questions, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask. And I'd really like you to read in advance. You get so much more out of this if you read in advance. Come up with questions, okay? But wait. What I like to do is, when you have a question, don't ask right away. Try to figure it out yourself. It's really helpful. So when I have questions all the time. I read something that I've never read before, or they're not really familiar with. I think about it, and questions arise. It's a good thing to have questions. But then I don't want to ask right away. I try and figure it out myself. I keep it in the back of my mind and throughout the day, and it's bizarre. Sometimes you're in a situation where it's very unexpected. You're brushing your teeth, or, I don't know, washing your socks, whatever, and suddenly you go like, oh, maybe that's what it is. And it kind of pops back up, and there's the answer. And it's much more effective if you come up with the answer, because it's like you won't forget. And leads to a better understanding. There's a deeper kind of understanding. But of course, at times that doesn't happen, and then you ask. But one of the first steps to going through confusion, right, when you read a text and you go, what? Is to formulate a question. Just like, first you don't even have a question. Right? It's like, what? I don't even want to ask, or I don't even understand anything. So, but then if you read a sentence and you go, oh yeah, that sentence, I have a question. So, okay, that's the first step, you have a question. And so you start having questions. And that helps your understanding. Already you get a sense, oh, this is this, because you have questions now, very precise questions. And slowly they fall away. So that's the process of learning that I'm familiar with. And then you debate, so more questions arise, and more and more. And that's seen as something good, as something positive, something helpful. And patience is needed. If you've just finished high school, you probably have an easier time with that than if you're older, because you're not so used to not knowing. Right? I mean, you finished high school, you're settling your job, etc. And then when you learn about Buddhism, suddenly everything else you understood perfectly in your life, everything, I mean, most things and suddenly you come across this and you go, I don't understand this. It's so frustrating. You're not used to not knowing any longer. Like in high school, you're kind of used to it. Right? School, you're used to it. But it's great, actually. It's great practice in patience, just not knowing, and then feeling like, oh, I need to figure this out. This is really interesting. All right. So hopefully I give you this opportunity to really confuse you, to have that experience. Anyway, going back to the mind. Now, having explained this, giving you this basic explanation of an appearing object and an object of engagement, as it's called, or that which is cognized or perceived by the mind. All right, object of perception, if you like. So now, based on that, you can divide the mind. You can categorize it into different types. And not surprising, our mind is so intricate. There's so many different types of awareness. Awareness, different types in terms of their objects and in terms of how they get at their object. Those are the main two characteristics that determine the difference between the different minds. Now, if you see on page 6, I categorized mind in 6 different types. That's not necessarily the traditional way. The traditional way, I would do it differently, but then you need more time. So just to give you a basic sense, there is a correct mind and there's a wrong mind, or a correct consciousness and a wrong consciousness. Okay, of course, correct and wrong, it's all relative, but the way we may agree on a mind being correct and a mind being wrong. Okay, so what do you think is the main factor that determines whether a mind is correct or wrong? What would determine that? From everything you've heard so far. So we differentiate between the different types of mind in terms of their objects and in terms of what the mind does with those objects. Now, a wrong consciousness is determined by what of those two aspects? Determined by the object or what the mind does with it? Or both or neither? What do you think? What the mind does with it. What else? Anyone else? Any other suggestions? Both. Okay, both. All right. Okay, interesting. So what is an example of a wrong mind?
Attachment.
How is it wrong? You're right, I agree. How is it wrong?
You see a screen and I think it's a snake.
You see a screen
It's
and you think it's a snake?
String.
A string. Oh, I see. Yeah. All right, that's very good. That's with regard to the object, right? Just seeing something. There's nothing wrong with seeing something, but seeing a string to be a snake, right? Here the object is snake based on something that is not a snake. So perceiving a string to be a snake. A string being a snake, does that exist? No. So a string being a snake doesn't exist, but your mind perceives it. So, in other words, if there's a wrong consciousness, your main object doesn't exist. But is whatever has, if it's a mind, the main object of which doesn't exist, does it have to be a wrong consciousness? Trick question, trick question. Yes? Oh no, that was not a hand.
Say again.
Oh, okay, so I'll say it again. If you have a wrong consciousness, if it's a wrong consciousness, the main object doesn't exist. So a string being a snake of course exists, but when you perceive a string to be a snake, you don't perceive a snake, you perceive a string as being a snake. That doesn't exist. Now, therefore, whatever is a wrong consciousness, its main object doesn't exist. But if its main object does not exist, a mind's main object does not exist, does it necessarily mean it's a wrong consciousness?
No, it exists in the mind.
Nothing exists.
There is
It's
other
an
things.
illusion.
He doesn't, the mind doesn't know it's so wrong, so he's right.
No, it's
Whoa, that was a lot. Oh, okay, so the mind doesn't know it's wrong, so it's right. Just because you don't know you're wrong, just because you don't know you're sick, doesn't mean that you're healthy. No, right? Just because the mind doesn't know it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's right. But it exists in the mind. But if it exists in the mind, does that mean it's a correct consciousness? No, right? But if its object doesn't exist, now this is really difficult. I mean, unless you have some background, it'd be difficult to understand or difficult to answer. If the mind's object, if there's a mind, the object of which doesn't exist, does it have to be a wrong mind?
No, it perceives it as it is not existing.
No.
they are
Even if it perceives it as non-existent, but that's a different mind, perceiving the first mind that perceives the string as a snake to be wrong. Now the mind that recognizes this is a wrong consciousness, it's a different mind.
Yes.
But that mind itself, whoa, snake, right? Like imagine this is a string. Oh, snake, that mind is wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
Out of that you go, ah, right? You react in a way that reflects that wrong awareness. But I give you a hint.
But the
What's
emotion
the
exists. The emotion exists.
The emotion exists. I'm just saying the object. The mind exists. But its object, snake,
No.
does not.
Maybe if you realize you
What's the
see a monster, there's no monster, but you think there is.
Okay, but the mind that thinks there is, you see, this is where it gets confusing because so many minds arise one after the other. You perceive something wrongly and then you go, uh-oh, not possible. That's a different mind altogether. First there's the wrong mind, and then there's another mind going, but they're no monsters, right? Never mind then. So that's a correct consciousness. And they arise one after the other very quickly. Now, that's in reality. Different minds arise all the time. But we're trying to slow it down to just understand those minds a little better. Let me give you a hint. A wrong consciousness is wrong unintentionally.
Like hallucinations.
Like hallucinations. But can you be wrong intentionally?
No.
Yes? Did you raise your...
Isn't the basic wrong perception in Buddhism is not understanding the emptiness in all phenomena. So
Okay.
everything is non-existent. So our thinking that it has an inherent existence is wrong mind. Like that is our basic wrongness.
Yes. Okay. I would agree that once you believe things to exist objectively and independently, if you have that kind of mind, it's a wrong mind. But I don't think you have that mind all the time. Okay, but to go back to my basic question, and we need to talk more about this, but to go back to my basic question, if your object doesn't exist, the mind's object, you take on an object, the mind holds on to an object and it doesn't exist, is that mind necessarily a wrong consciousness? Yes.
I think when you try to create something,
Yes.
you use your imagination.
When you do it purposely, even in meditation you can do that. There are some meditations that are not realistic, but you do them for a certain purpose. What is an example of a meditation that is not realistic? Yes?
It's not a meditation, but you just showed us the stick
Yes.
in order to perceive it as a string, which is a snake.
Yes. Yes.
So we did it
Uh huh.
purposely.
Yes. Exactly.